What happens when a duchess walks onto a daytime talk show expecting royal treatment and instead gets real questions? In just 39 seconds of one single comment, an entire interview would explode into the most shocking exit in talk show history. Tamron Hall had built her reputation on asking the questions other hosts wouldn't dare touch. She was known for her warmth, yes, but also for her refusal to let celebrity status become a shield against accountability. So when Meghan Markle arrived at the studio that afternoon, the stage was set for something nobody could have predicted. The interview started smoothly enough. Meghan settled into the guest chair, her posture perfect, her smile carefully measured. Tamron opened with a standard welcome, thanking her for coming on the show. The audience applauded politely. Everything seemed normal. But anyone who knew Tamron's interview style could sense something simmering beneath the surface. "Thank you for having me," Meghan said, her voice carrying that practiced blend of humility and importance that she had perfected over years in the spotlight. Tamron smiled, her notes resting on her lap. "I want to start by talking about your recent project. You've been very vocal about certain issues. Can you tell our audience what inspired this particular initiative?" It was a softball question, an easy opening, but Meghan's response came with an edge that caught everyone off guard. "Well, Tamron, I think what people need to understand is that when you've lived the life I've lived, when you've experienced the things I've experienced, you gain a perspective that most people simply don't have. This project comes from a place of deep understanding that I'm not sure everyone in this room could really grasp." The studio went quiet. Tamron's eyebrows raised slightly, but her smile remained steady. She was a professional. She had handled difficult guests before. But there was something in Meghan's tone, something dismissive, that signaled this wasn't going to be a typical interview. "I think our audience is pretty capable of understanding important issues," Tamron replied, her voice still friendly, but with a hint of steel beneath it. "Many of the people watching have overcome incredible challenges in their own lives." Meghan laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made everyone uncomfortable. Of course, I'm not saying they haven't. I'm just saying that there are levels to this. There's what regular people experience, and then there's what I've been through." Tamron shifted in her seat. "Regular people?" "You know what I mean," Meghan said, waving her hand dismissively. "People who haven't been under the kind of scrutiny I've faced. People who don't have every move analyzed, every word twisted. It's a different level of pressure." "Right," Tamron said slowly. "But I think many people deal with intense pressure in their own ways. Single mothers working 3 jobs. People battling serious illnesses. Families dealing with loss. Would you say your experiences are more valid than theirs?" It was a fair question, a journalist's question. But Meghan's face changed. Her carefully constructed composure began to crack. "That's not what I said," Meghan replied, her voice rising slightly. "You're twisting my words, which is exactly what the media always does to me. This is exactly the problem." Tamron remained calm. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm asking you to clarify what you meant by saying your experiences give you a perspective that most people in this room couldn't grasp. I'm giving you the opportunity to explain that statement." "I don't need to explain myself to you," Meghan snapped. The audience gasped quietly. This was live television. This was actually happening. Tamron leaned forward slightly. "Meghan, you came on this show to discuss your project and your perspectives. I'm asking you questions about those perspectives. That's what an interview is." "An interview is supposed to be a conversation," Meghan shot back. "This feels like an interrogation. I thought you were supposed to be one of the good ones, Tamron. I thought you would understand." "Understand what, exactly?" Tamron asked. Her voice was still even, still professional, but everyone could sense her patience wearing thin. "Understand what it's like to be a woman of color in spaces that weren't built for us," Meghan said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But I guess you've become too comfortable in your position to remember what that's like. You've become part of the establishment." The studio went dead silent. Crew members exchanged shocked glances. This was crossing a line, and everyone knew it. Tamron took a slow breath. "I have never forgotten where I come from, or what I've had to overcome to sit in this chair. And I've certainly never used my identity as a shield against legitimate questions. Every guest who comes on this show gets asked real questions. That includes you." "Real questions?" Meghan's voice was sharp now, all pretense of politeness gone. "You've been trying to trap me since I sat down. You invited me here under false pretenses. You told my team this would be a friendly conversation about my work." "This is a friendly conversation," Tamron replied firmly. "But friendly doesn't mean I won't ask you to back up your statements. You made a claim about having a unique perspective. I asked you to explain it. That's journalism." Meghan stood up abruptly, her microphone pack pulling against the wire. "I don't have to sit here and be disrespected like this. Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed? What I've given up?" Tamron remained seated, her composure unshaken. "I know exactly who you are. You're a guest on my show who agreed to an interview. If you can't handle basic questions about your own statements, then maybe you're not ready for this conversation. Maybe you're not qualified to have this conversation," Meghan fired back. "Maybe you've spent so long kissing up to the network executives that you've forgotten how to be authentic. You've sold out, Tamron. You're just another puppet." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Tamron's jaw tightened, but when she spoke, her voice was measured and controlled. "I've worked for over 20 years in this industry. I've covered stories that put my life at risk. I've asked powerful people uncomfortable questions when everyone told me to stay quiet. I've built this show on integrity and honesty. I have never, not once, sold out my values for anyone. And I certainly won't be lectured about authenticity by someone who changes their story, depending on which audience they're addressing." Meghan's face flushed red. "How dare you? You have no idea what you're talking about. You sit here in your comfortable little studio with your comfortable little show, and you think you can judge me? You think you understand my life?" "I'm not judging your life," Tamron said, standing now to meet Meghan at eye level. "I'm asking you to have a real conversation instead of hiding behind victim narratives every time someone asks you a direct question. That's all I've been trying to do since you sat down." "Victim narratives?" Meghan's voice reached a new pitch. "I am a victim. I've been victimized by the press, by institutions, by people like you who pretend to be allies, but are really just waiting for a chance to tear me down." "People like me," Tamron repeated quietly. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Meghan seemed to realize she had gone too far, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "You know exactly what I mean. You've made it in this industry by playing it safe, by not rocking the boat, by being palatable to white audiences. I actually stood up for something. I actually sacrificed something real." The audience was beyond shocked now. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were looking around, uncertain if they should even be witnessing this. Tamron's voice, when she finally spoke, was ice cold. "Get off my stage." "Excuse me?" Meghan said, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You heard me," Tamron said clearly. "Get off my stage. You came here expecting to be coddled and praised without any pushback. You expected me to sit here and nod while you made sweeping statements about your superiority over regular people. And when I asked you to simply explain yourself, you attacked me personally and professionally. You insulted my integrity, my career, and my identity. This interview is over." Meghan's mouth opened and closed. She looked around at the audience, perhaps expecting support, but found only stunned faces staring back at her. "You can't kick me off. I'm the guest. People are watching because of me." "People are watching because this is my show," Tamron said firmly. "A show I built through hard work and dedication, not through marriage, not through calculated media appearances, through actual journalism. And on my show, we treat people with respect. That includes me. Since you're clearly incapable of that, you need to leave. Now. This is outrageous, Meghan sputtered, fumbling with her microphone. Wait until people hear about this. Wait until my team releases a statement. You'll be finished. I'm shaking, Tamron said flatly. Security will show you out. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the stage. Meghan looked at them, then back at Tamron, her face a mixture of rage and disbelief. You're making a huge mistake. A huge mistake. I have platforms. I have influence. I can destroy your career with one interview. Tamron crossed her arms. There's the door. Fine, Meghan spat. Fine. I don't need this. I don't need you. I have plenty of other shows that would be honored to have me. Shows with hosts who actually know how to conduct an interview properly. I'm sure you'll find someone willing to let you monologue without interruption, Tamron said, but it won't be here. Goodbye, Meghan. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair, nearly knocking over the small table with the water glasses. She turned to the audience, perhaps hoping for one last moment, one last chance to make her case. But the audience remained silent, watching this train wreck unfold with morbid fascination. You're all going to regret this, Meghan said, pointing vaguely at everyone and no one. Every single one of you. When the truth comes out, when my side of the story is told, you'll see. You'll all see that I was right. The truth has been on display for the last 10 minutes, Tamron said quietly. That's the problem. Meghan turned on her heel, her expensive shoes clicking sharply against the studio floor. She walked toward the exit with her head held high, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. But everyone could see her hands shaking. Everyone could see the fury radiating off her in waves. As she reached the door, she turned back one more time. This isn't over, Tamron. Not by a long shot. Yes, Tamron said calmly. It is. The door closed behind Meghan with a heavy thud. For a moment, nobody moved. The audience sat, frozen. The crew members stood with their mouths open. Even Tamron seemed to need a second to process what had just happened. Then she turned to the camera, her professional mask sliding back into place. Well, she said, and despite everything, there was a hint of a smile on her face. That was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue with our scheduled programming. Stay with us. The commercial break music started, but in the studio, chaos erupted. Producers rushed onto the stage. Audience members started talking all at once. Tamron stood in the center of it all, perfectly calm, perfectly composed. One of the producers approached her, tablet in hand, already pulled up to social media. Tamron, this is already trending. It's everywhere. What do you want to do? Tamron looked at the screen, seeing the clips already being shared, the comments flooding in, the takes getting hotter by the second. She handed the tablet back without reading any of it. We do the show, she said simply. We continue with our next segment as planned. We don't make this bigger than it needs to be. But Tamron, the producer pressed, everyone is going to want a statement. They're going to want your side of what just happened. My side? Tamron looked genuinely puzzled. My side was on display for everyone to see. I asked questions. She couldn't handle it. End of story. I'm not going to spend the rest of the day dissecting someone else's behavior. We have a show to do. Another producer chimed in. Her team is already calling. They want to talk about what happened. They're threatening legal action. Tamron laughed. A real laugh this time. Legal action for what? For being asked questions on a talk show? Let them try. Everything that happened is on tape. Every word, every accusation, every insult. The truth is the truth. The commercial break was ending. Tamron smoothed down her blazer, checked her reflection in the monitor, and took her seat again. When the cameras came back on, she was the picture of professionalism. Welcome back, she said to the camera, as if the previous segment had been perfectly normal. Now, we have an incredible next guest who's going to talk to us about her new book on resilience and overcoming adversity. Please welcome to the stage. The show continued. Tamron interviewed her next guest with the same warmth and engagement she always brought to her work. She asked thoughtful questions. She listened carefully to the answers. She was, in every way, the consummate professional. But in the control room, the phones were ringing off the hook. News outlets wanted statements. Other shows wanted Tamron to come on and discuss what happened. Social media was divided, with some praising Tamron for standing her ground and others claiming she had been too harsh. Through it all, Tamron focused on her show. She moved through each segment with grace and skill, never once acknowledging the elephant in the room. It was only after the final commercial break, as she delivered her closing remarks, that she addressed it at all. "Before we go," she said, looking directly into the camera, "I want to say something about what happened earlier in the show. I've spent my entire career trying to create a space where real conversations can happen, where people can share their truths, their struggles, their triumphs. But real conversations require mutual respect. They require a willingness to engage honestly, to answer questions, to have a dialogue instead of a monologue." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I will always treat my guests with respect and dignity, but I also expect the same in return. Not because I'm special, but because everyone deserves that basic level of courtesy. When that line gets crossed, when that respect disappears, I won't hesitate to end the conversation. This show has always been built on integrity, and that's not going to change." She smiled then, warm and genuine. Thank you all for watching, for your continued support, and for understanding that sometimes the most important thing we can do is stand up for ourselves. See you tomorrow. The credits rolled. The audience applauded, louder and longer than they had for any other segment. Tamron stood, waving to them, thanking them for being there. As she walked off stage, her team surrounded her, everyone talking at once. But Tamron just kept walking, heading to her dressing room with her head high. She had done her job. She had asked the questions that needed to be asked. She had maintained her integrity in the face of personal attacks. She had shown exactly what happens when entitlement meets accountability. In her dressing room, she finally sat down, letting out a long breath. Her phone was buzzing constantly with messages of support from colleagues, friends, and other journalists who had faced similar situations. She scrolled through a few of them, allowing herself a small smile. There was a knock on the door. Her executive producer came in, looking both stressed and impressed. "That was the most insane thing I've ever witnessed in 30 years of television." "Tell me about it," Tamron said, shaking her head. "Are you okay?" the producer asked. "That got pretty personal." "I'm fine," Tamron said, and she meant it. "I've dealt with worse. At least this time it was all caught on camera. Nobody can twist what happened or claim I was unfair. It's all right there." "The network is backing you 100%, the producer said. "They've already released a statement supporting your decision to end the interview." "Good," Tamron said, "though I wasn't really asking for permission." The producer laughed. "No, I don't suppose you were." As the day wound down, as the chaos began to settle, Tamron reflected on what had transpired. She thought about all the interviews she had done over the years, all the difficult conversations she had navigated. This one would be remembered, certainly. It would be talked about, analyzed, debated. But at the end of the day, she had simply done what she always did. She asked questions. She sought truth. She refused to compromise her standards for anyone, no matter how famous or how entitled they believed themselves to be. And when faced with disrespect, when faced with someone who saw the interview as a platform for monologue rather than dialogue, she had done what any person with self-respect would do. She had ended the conversation. In the weeks that followed, the clip would be viewed millions of times. People would debate whether Tamron had been too harsh or not harsh enough. Meghan's supporters would claim she had been ambushed. Tamron's supporters would point to the footage as proof that she had simply been doing her job. But in that moment, in her dressing room, Tamron wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the next show, the next interview, the next opportunity to have a real conversation with someone willing to engage honestly. Because that's what she did. That's who she was. And no amount of drama or controversy or entitled outrage was going to change that. She picked up her bag, turned off the lights in her dressing room, and headed home. Tomorrow was another day, another show, another chance to prove that integrity and accountability still mattered. And if that made her the bad guy in someone else's story, well, she could live with that, because she knew the truth. And in the end, the truth was all that mattered. The interview that was supposed to be a friendly conversation about projects and initiatives had instead become a masterclass in what happens when someone confuses a platform with a pedestal, when someone mistakes an interview for an opportunity to preach rather than engage. Tamron had offered Meghan every opportunity to have a meaningful dialogue. She had asked fair questions, given chances to clarify, maintained her professionalism even when it wasn't reciprocated. But when those opportunities were met with condescension, insults, and entitlement, she had drawn a line. Not because she was cruel, not because she was trying to create drama, but because some boundaries are worth defending, some standards are worth maintaining, and some conversations aren't worth having if they require you to abandon your dignity. As she drove home that evening, Tamron thought about all the young journalists who would watch that clip. She hoped they would see not just the confrontation, but the principle behind it. The importance of asking hard questions. The necessity of holding everyone, regardless of their status, to the same standard. The courage it takes to end a conversation that has become toxic. She thought about all the viewers who had ever felt dismissed or talked down to by someone who thought they were better. She hoped they had seen themselves in her refusal to accept that treatment. She hoped they had been reminded that respect is a two-way street, and that standing up for yourself is not the same as being difficult. Most of all, she thought about the interview itself. The moment when Meghan had called her a sellout, had questioned her authenticity, had tried to use their shared identity as a weapon rather than a bridge. That had been the moment when Tamron knew the interview was over. Because some insults aren't just personal. They're attempts to undermine everything you've worked for, everything you stand for. And Tamron had not worked this hard, for this long, to let anyone diminish her journey or her integrity. Not for ratings, not for a viral moment, not for anything. The next morning, she would wake up and do it all over again. She would walk into that studio with her head high, ready to have real conversations with people who were willing to engage honestly, ready to ask hard questions and expect thoughtful answers, ready to maintain the standards that had made her show a success. Because that's what real journalism looks like. That's what real conversation requires. And that's what happens when you refuse to compromise your values, no matter who is sitting across from you.